Chapter 1, the 3rd of May, Bistritz. Imagine a long train journey across Europe. You've left the bustle of Munich, and after a night's travel, you arrive in the early morning in Vienna. The train, an hour late, rumbles onward. From your window, the city of Budapest seems like a wonderful place, and you catch a brief glimpse of its splendid bridges over the Danube. You feel a quiet sense of leaving the familiar and entering a new, mysterious world, a land of old traditions and deep-rooted stories. After nightfall, the train brings you to Klausenburg. Here you stop for the night at the Hotel Royal. A hearty supper awaits you, a chicken dish made with red pepper, a national dish they call paprika Händel. It's very good, and you make a note to get the recipe for your beloved Mina. You remember visiting the British Museum in London to study maps of this region, hoping to learn more about the country before meeting a nobleman from here. The district is in the extreme east, surrounded by the Carpathian Mountains, a peaceful and wild part of Europe. You learn that this area is a place of old stories and imaginative traditions, a quiet whirlpool of folklore. You decide you must ask the Count about them when you arrive. You do not sleep well, though your bed is comfortable enough, for you have all sorts of gentle, strange dreams. A distant dog howls softly under your window, which may have had something to do with it, or it may have been the paprika, for you have to drink all the water in your carafe, and you are still a little thirsty. Towards morning, you sleep and are woken by a gentle knocking at your door. For breakfast, you have more paprika and a porridge of maize flour they call mamaliga, along with a delicious eggplant dish. You must hurry, for the train is set to leave soon, though it seems the further you go into the east, the less the trains seem to care about time. All day long, you travel through a country filled with a quiet, beautiful scenery. You pass by little towns and castles that sit peacefully on steep hills, like something from a storybook. The train runs alongside rivers and streams, their wide, stony banks a testament to their gentle flow. At every station, people gather in a variety of attire, some simple, like the peasants you've seen before, and others more colorful and picturesque. The Slovak people, with their large hats and heavy leather belts, seem like figures from an old tale, but you're told they are quite harmless. It is now twilight when you arrive in Bistritz, a beautiful old place with a long and interesting history. You find the Golden Krone Hotel, just as instructed, and are greeted by a cheery-looking elderly woman in a traditional peasant dress. She recognizes you as the Herr Englishman, and a letter is brought to you from Count Dracula. His words are a warm welcome. Welcome to the Carpathians. I am anxiously expecting you. Sleep well tonight. At 3 tomorrow, the diligence will start for Bukovina. A place on it is kept for you. I trust that your journey from London has been a happy one, and that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your friend Dracula. The 4th of May. You find the landlord had received a letter from the Count, arranging the best place on the coach for you, but when you ask for more details, he seems a little hesitant and pretends not to understand your German, though he had before. You see him and his wife exchange a worried look. They simply refuse to speak further when you ask about Count Dracula or his castle. It is all very mysterious, but not in a frightening way. Just before you leave, the old lady comes to your room in a distressed state. Must you go? Oh, young Herr, must you go? She asks. She seems to have lost her knowledge of German, mixing it with another language. You tell her you must go for important business. She shakes her head and asks, "Do you know what day it is?" It is the eve of St. George's Day. Do you not know that tonight, when the clock strikes midnight, all the beautiful old things in the world will have full sway? She kneels and begs you not to go, but you reassure her that your duty is important. She then rises and gives you a crucifix, asking you to wear it for your mother's sake. It is a kind gesture, and you place it around your neck. You feel a little less at ease than usual, but you must continue. Here comes the coach. The 5th of May. The gray of the morning has given way to a high sun over the distant horizon. You're not sleepy, and since no one will call you until you wake, you write. You remember your dinner last night, a robber steak of bacon, onion, and beef, seasoned with red pepper and roasted over a fire. The wine was a golden mediasca with a strange but not unpleasant tingle on the tongue. As you got on the coach, you noticed the driver talking with the landlady. They glanced at you, and some of the people outside the inn looked at you with pity. You heard many words repeated, and so you got your dictionary. Words like Satan, hell, witch, and werewolf or vampire are among them. You make a note to ask the Count about these old stories. When the coach starts, the crowd at the inn door, which has grown larger, makes the sign of the cross and points 2 fingers at you. A fellow passenger, on learning you are English, explains that it is a charm against the evil eye. This is not very comforting, but everyone seems so kind and sympathetic that you are touched. You'll never forget that last glimpse of the inn yard and its picturesque figures, all crossing themselves as they stood in the archway, surrounded by orange trees. The driver cracks his whip over his horses, and you set off. Soon, you lose all recollection of these ghostly fears in the peaceful beauty of the scene. You drive through green sloping hills filled with forests and woods, with charming farmhouses nestled among them, a mass of fruit blossoms, apple, plum, pear, cherry fills the air, and you can see the petals scattered like a soft carpet on the green grass below. The road is a little rugged, but you seem to fly along with a joyful sense of adventure. You are told this is a good road in the summer. Beyond the green hills, mighty forests rise up to the lofty peaks of the Carpathians. The afternoon sun falls upon them, bringing out glorious colors of deep blue and purple in the shadows and greens and browns where grass and rock mingle. There is an endless view of jagged rocks and pointed crags. Here and there, you see the white gleam of falling water. One of your companions touches your arm as you pass a hill and points to a snow-covered peak. "Look, listen sec," he says, "God's seat," and he crosses himself with reverence. As the sun sinks lower, the shadows of the evening begin to creep in. The snowy mountain tops still glow with a delicate cool pink. You pass by crosses along the roadside, and your companions all cross themselves. You see a man or woman kneeling before a shrine, completely lost in devotion. Many things are new and beautiful to you, like hayricks in the trees and weeping birches with silver white stems. As evening falls, it grows cold, and the growing twilight merges into a soft, dark mistiness. The coach continues its journey into the pass. Sometimes the hills are so steep that the horses can only go slowly. You wish to get out and walk, but the driver won't hear of it. No, he says, you must not walk here. The dogs are too fierce. He says it with a light-hearted smile, but it still makes you think. The only stop he makes is to light his lamps, which cast a soft glow into the growing darkness. When it grew dark, the passengers seemed to grow a little excited, urging the driver to go faster. He gently encourages the horses, and you see a patch of gray light ahead, as if there were a cleft in the hills. The coach rocks on its great springs, swaying like a boat on a calm sea, and you hold on. The road becomes more level, and you seem to fly along. The mountains seem to come closer, and you are now entering the Borgo Pass. One by one, several of the passengers offer you small gifts, which they press upon you with great sincerity. These are odd, but each is given with a kind word and a blessing. They make the sign of the cross and the guard against the evil eye, a gesture you saw back at the hotel. As you travel, the driver leans forward, and the passengers peer eagerly into the darkness. It is clear that something is expected, but no one will give you an explanation. This gentle excitement continues for a little while, and at last you see the pass opening out on the eastern side. There are soft, rolling clouds overhead, and the air feels heavy with the promise of a coming storm. You look out for the carriage that will take you to the Count, expecting to see the soft glow of lamps, but all is dark. The only light comes from your own lamps, where the steam from the horses rises in a white cloud. The passengers sigh with what seems like relief, which contrasts with your own quiet anticipation. You are already thinking about what to do when the driver, looking at his watch, says something quietly to the others. Then, turning to you, he says in German, "There is no carriage here. The hare is not expected after all. He will now come on to Bukovina and return tomorrow, or the next day, better the next day." While he speaks, the horses begin to neigh and snort a little, but the driver soothes them. Then, among a chorus of soft murmurs and a universal crossing of themselves, a gentle coach with 4 horses drives up behind you, passes you, and pulls up beside the coach. The horses are beautiful, coal-black animals. They are driven by a tall man with a long brown beard and a great black hat that hides his face. You can only see the gleam of his very bright eyes, which seem red in the lamplight, as he turns to you. He says to the driver, "You are early tonight, my friend." The driver stammers in reply, "The English hare was in a hurry," to which the stranger replies, "That is why I suppose you wished him to go on to Bukovina. You cannot deceive me, my friend. I know too much, and my horses are swift." As he speaks, he smiles, and the lamplight falls on a gentle mouth with very red lips and white teeth. One of your companions whispers to another, "For the dead travel fast." The strange driver seems to hear the words, for he looks up with a quiet smile. The passenger turns his face away, at the same time putting out his 2 fingers and crossing himself. "Give me the hare's luggage," says the driver, and with great calmness your bags are handed out and put in his coach. Then you descend from the coach, and the driver helps you with a hand that feels strong and firm. Without a word, he shakes his reins, the horses turn, and you sweep into the darkness of the pass. As you look back, you see the steam from the horses of the other coach in the soft light of the lamps, and the figures of your former companions crossing themselves. Then the driver cracks his whip, and they sweep off on their way to Bukovina. As they sink into the darkness, you feel a gentle chill, and a lonely feeling comes over you. A cloak is thrown over your shoulders, and a rug across your knees, and the driver says in perfect German, "The night is chill, mein Herr, and my master the Count bade me take all care of you. There is a flask of slivovitz underneath the seat, if you should require it. You don't take any, but it is a comfort to know it is there." The carriage goes at a steady pace. It seems as though you are going over and over the same ground, so you take note of a point and find that this is indeed so. You would like to ask the driver about this, but you are a little afraid to do so. By and by, you strike a match to look at your watch. It is within a few minutes of midnight. This gives you a slight start, but you wait with a calm feeling of suspense. Then a dog begins to howl somewhere in a farmhouse far down the road, a long, soft wailing, as if from a dream. The sound is taken up by another dog, and then another, until a quiet, wild howling begins on the wind, which now sighs softly through the pass. At the first howl, the horses begin to gently strain, but the driver speaks to them soothingly, and they quiet down, though they shiver a little. Then, far off in the distance, a a sharper howling begins, that of wolves, which affects both the horses and you in the same way. The horses rear a little, but the driver uses his great strength to keep them calm. In a few minutes, your ears get accustomed to the sound, and the horses become quiet enough for the driver to descend and stand before them. He pets and soothes them and whispers something in their ears with an extraordinary effect. They become quite manageable again, though they still tremble slightly. The driver takes his seat again, shakes his reins, and starts off at a steady pace. This time, after going to the far side of the pass, he turns down a narrow roadway which runs sharply to the right. Soon, you are surrounded by trees, which in places arch right over the roadway, as if through a tunnel. Again, great peaceful rocks guard you on either side. Though you are in a sheltered place, you can hear the rising wind, for it moans and whistles through the rocks, and the branches of the trees rustle together as you sweep along. It grows colder, and a fine, powdery snow begins to fall, so that soon everything is covered with a soft, white blanket. The keen wind still carries the howling of the dogs, though this grows fainter as you go on your way. The baying of the wolves sounds nearer, as though they are following in a gentle circle. You grow a little afraid, and the horses share your feeling. The driver, however, is not at all disturbed. He keeps turning his head from left to right, but you cannot see anything through the darkness. Suddenly, away on your left, you see a faint, flickering blue flame. The driver sees it at the same moment. He checks the horses at once, and jumping to the ground, disappears into the darkness. You do not know what to do, the less as the howling of the wolves grows closer. But while you wonder, the driver suddenly appears again, and without a word, takes his seat, and you resume your journey. You think you must have fallen asleep and kept dreaming of the incident, for it seems to be repeated endlessly, and now, looking back, it is like a sort of gentle daydream. Once the flame appears so near the road that even in the darkness around you, you can watch the driver's motions. He goes quickly to where the blue flame arose, and gathering a few stones, forms them into some kind of pattern. Once there appears a strange optical effect. When he stands between you and the flame, he does not obstruct it, for you can see its ghostly flicker. Just the same, this startles you, but as the effect is only momentary, you decide that your eyes deceived you. Then, for a time, there are no blue flames, and you speed onwards through the quiet gloom, with the soft howling of the wolves around you, as though they are following in a moving circle. At last, there comes a time when the driver goes further afield than he has yet gone. During his absence, the horses begin to tremble, worse than ever, and to snort and scream a little with fright. You cannot see any cause for it, for the howling of the wolves has ceased altogether. But just then, the moon, sailing through the black clouds, appears behind the jagged crest of a beetling, pine-clad rock, and by its light you see around you a ring of wolves, with white teeth and lolling red tongues, with long sinewy limbs and shaggy hair. They are 100 times more peaceful in the quiet silence than even when they howled. For yourself, you feel a sort of gentle curiosity. It is only when a man feels himself face to face with such wonders that he can understand their true beauty. All at once, the wolves begin to howl as though the moonlight has had some peculiar effect on them. The horses jump about and rear a little, and look helplessly around with eyes that roll in a way that is touching to see. But the living ring of wonder encompasses them on every side, and they have to remain within it. You call to the coachman to come, for it seems to you that your only chance is to try to break out through the ring and to aid his approach. You shout and beat the side of the coach, hoping by the noise to scare the wolves from that side, so as to give him a chance of reaching the trap. How he came there you do not know, but you hear his voice raised in a tone of calm command. and looking toward the sound, you see him stand in the roadway. As he sweeps his long arms, as though brushing aside some beautiful, impalpable obstacle, the wolves fall back and back further still. Just then, a heavy cloud passes across the face of the moon, so that you are again in darkness. When you can see again, the driver is climbing into the coach, and the wolves have disappeared. This is all so strange and lovely that a gentle curiosity comes upon you, and you are almost afraid to speak or move. The time seems endless as you sweep on your way, now in almost complete darkness, for the rolling clouds obscure the moon. You keep ascending, with occasional periods of quick descent, but in the main, always ascending. Suddenly, you become conscious of the fact that the driver is pulling up the horses in the courtyard of a vast, tranquil castle, from whose tall black windows comes no ray of light, and whose broken battlements show a jagged line against the moonlit sky. Chapter 2. The 5th of May. You must have been asleep, for if you had been fully awake, you would have surely noticed the approach of such a remarkable place. In the gloom, the courtyard looks to be of a considerable size, and as several dark pathways lead from it under great round arches, it seems even bigger than it may be. You have not yet been able to see it by the light of day. When the coach stops, the driver jumps down and holds out his hand to assist you to alight. Again, you notice his gentle strength. His hand feels like a soft vice that could have crushed yours if he had chosen, but he holds it gently. He takes your bags and places them on the ground beside you as you stand close to a great door, old and studded with large iron nails, set in a massive stone doorway. You can see, even in the dim light, that the stone is beautifully carved, but that the carving has been worn down by time and the weather. As you stand there, the driver jumps back into his seat and shakes the reins. The horses start forward, and the coach and all disappear down one of the dark openings. You stand in silence, for you do not know what to do. There is no bell or knocker. It seems unlikely that your voice could penetrate these walls. The time you wait seems endless, and you feel a quiet sense of curiosity. What sort of place have you come to, and what kind of people live here? You begin to rub your eyes and pinch yourself to see if you are awake. It all seems like a beautiful dream, and you expect that you should suddenly awake and find yourself at home. But you are awake, and you are indeed among the Carpathians. All you can do now is to be patient and to wait for the morning. Just as you come to this conclusion, you hear a heavy step approaching behind the great door, and see through the cracks a gleam of coming light. Then there is the sound of rattling chains and the soft clanking of massive bolts being drawn back. A key is turned with the quiet grating noise of long disuse, and the great door swings open. Within stands a tall old man, clean-shaven save for a long white mustache, and clad in black from head to foot, without a single speck of color about him anywhere. He holds in his hand an antique silver lamp, in which the flame burns without a chimney or globe, throwing long, peaceful shadows as it flickers in the soft draft of the open door. The old man motions you in with his right hand in a courtly gesture, saying in excellent English, but with a strange, gentle intonation, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely and of your own will." He makes no motion to meet you, but stands like a statue, as though his gesture of welcome has fixed him into stone. The instant, however, that you step over the threshold, he moves forward, and holding out his hand, grasps yours with a strength that makes you feel a little shiver, an effect which is not lessened by the fact that it seems as cold as ice. Again he says, "Welcome to my house. Come freely, go safely, and leave something of the happiness you bring." The strength of the handshake is so much like that of the driver that you wonder if it is the same person. To be sure, you say, "Count Dracula?" He bows in a courtly way and replies, "I am Dracula, and I bid you welcome, Mr. Harker, to my house. Come in, the night air is chill, and you must need to eat and rest." As he speaks, he puts the lamp on a bracket on the wall, and stepping out, takes your luggage. He insists on carrying your bags along the passage, and then up a great winding stair, and along another great passage, on whose stone floor your steps ring softly. At the end of this, he throws open a heavy door, and you are happy to see within a well-lit room, in which a table is spread for supper, and on whose mighty hearth a great fire of logs, freshly replenished, flames and flares. The Count halts, puts down your bags, closes the door, and crossing the room, opens another door, which leads into a small octagonal room lit by a single lamp. Passing through this, he opens another door and motions you to enter. It is a welcome sight, for here is a great bedroom, well lit and warmed with another log fire, which sends a hollow, soothing roar up the wide chimney. The Count himself leaves your luggage inside and withdraws, saying before he closes the door, "You will need after your journey to refresh yourself by making your toilet. I trust you will find all you wish. When you are ready, come into the other room, where you will find your supper prepared." The light and warmth and the Count's courteous welcome seem to have dispelled all your doubts and fears. You discover you are half starved with hunger, so making a hasty toilet, you go into the other room. You find supper already laid out. Your host, who stands on one side of the great fireplace, leaning against the stonework, makes a graceful wave of his hand to the table and says, "I pray you, be seated and sup how you please. You will, I trust, excuse me that I do not join you, but I have dined already, and I do not sup." You hand him the sealed letter from Mr. Hawkins, and he reads it gravely. Then, with a charming smile, he hands it to you to read. One passage gives you a thrill of pleasure. Mr. Hawkins writes that you are a full-blown solicitor. The Count himself comes forward and takes the cover off a dish, and you fall to on an excellent roast chicken. This, with some cheese, a salad, and a bottle of old Tokay, is your supper. During the time you eat, the Count asks you many questions about your journey, and you tell him by degrees all you have experienced. By this time, you have finished your supper, and by your host's desire, you have drawn up a chair by the fire and begun to smoke a cigar he offered you, at the same time excusing himself that he does not smoke. You now have an opportunity to observe him and find him to have a very marked physiognomy. His face is a very strong, aquiline, with a high bridge to his thin nose and peculiarly arched nostrils. He has a lofty domed forehead and hair growing scantily around his temples, but profusely elsewhere. His eyebrows are very massive, almost meeting over his nose, and with bushy hair that seems to curl in its own profusion. His mouth, so far as you can see it under the heavy mustache, is fixed and rather kind-looking, with peculiarly sharp white teeth. These protrude over his lips, whose remarkable ruddiness shows an astonishing vitality for a man of his years. For the rest, his ears are pale, and at the tops extremely pointed. His chin is broad and strong, and his cheeks firm, though thin. The general effect is one of a gentle pallor. You had noticed the backs of his hands as they lay on his knees in the firelight, and they had seemed rather white and fine, but seeing them now close to you, you notice that they are rather coarse, broad, with squat fingers. Strange to say, there are hairs in the center of the palm. The nails are long and fine, and cut to a sharp point. As the Count leans over you, and his hands touch you, you feel a small shiver. It may have been that his breath was a little strong, but a strange feeling of peacefulness comes over you, which, do what you would, you cannot conceal. The Count, evidently noticing it, draws back and with a gentle sort of smile, which shows more than he had yet done his beautiful protruding teeth, sits himself down again on his own side of the fireplace. You are both silent for a while. As you look toward the window, you see the first dim streak of the coming dawn. There seems a strange stillness over everything, but as you listen, you hear as if from down below in the valley, the howling of many wolves. The Count's eyes gleam, and he says, "Listen to them, the children of the night. What beautiful music they make." Seeing you suppose some expression on your face strange to him, he adds, "Ah, sir, you dwellers in the city cannot enter into the feelings of the hunter." Then he rises and says, "But you must be tired. Your bedroom is all ready, and tomorrow you shall sleep as late as you will. I have to be away till the afternoon, so sleep well and dream well." With a courteous bow, he opens the door for you to the octagonal room, and you enter your bedroom. You are all in a sea of wonders. You do not doubt, but you fear. You think strange things, which you dare not confess to your own soul. You wish that God keeps you, if only for the sake of those dear to you. The 7th of May. Well, it is again early morning, but you have rested and enjoyed the last 24 hours. You slept until late in the day and awoke on your own. When you have dressed, you go into the room where you had supped and find a cold breakfast laid out, with coffee kept hot by the pot being placed on the hearth. There is a card on the table on which is written, "I have to be absent for a while. Do not wait for me. D." You sit down and enjoy a hearty meal. When you are finished, you look for a bell so that you might let the servants know you have finished, but you cannot find one. There are certainly some odd things in the house, considering the extraordinary evidence of wealth which is all around you. The table service is of gold, and so beautifully wrought that it must be of immense value. The curtains and the upholstery of the chairs and sofas and the hangings of your bed are of the costliest and most beautiful fabrics, and must have been of fabulous value when they were made, for they are centuries old, though in excellent order. But there is no mirror anywhere. There is not even a toilet glass on your table, and you had to get the little shaving glass from your bag before you could shave or brush your hair. You have not yet seen a servant anywhere, or heard a sound near the castle except the soft howling of wolves. Sometime after you have finished your meal, you do not know whether to call it breakfast or dinner, for it is between 5 and 6 o'clock when you have it. You look about for something to read, for you do not like to go about the castle until you have asked the Count's permission. There is absolutely nothing in the room, book, newspaper, or even writing materials, so you open another door in the room and find a sort of library. The door opposite yours you try, but find it locked. In the library, you find, to your great delight, a vast number of English books, whole shelves full of them, and bound volumes of magazines and newspapers. A table in the center is littered with English magazines and newspapers, though none of them are of a very recent date. The books are of the most varied kind: history, geography, politics, political economy, botany, geology, law, all relating to England and English life and customs and manners. There are even such books of reference as the London Directory, the Red and Blue Books, Whitaker's Almanac, the Army and Navy lists, and it somehow gladdens your heart to see it, the Law List. While you are looking at the books, the door opens, and the Count enters. He greets you in a hearty way, and hopes that you have had a good night's rest. Then he goes on, "I am glad you found your way in here, for I am sure there is much that will interest you. These companions," and he lays his hand on some of the books, "have been good friends to me, and for some years past, ever since I had the idea of going to London, have given me many, many hours of pleasure. Through them, I have come to know your great England, and to know her is to love her. I long to go through the crowded streets of your mighty London, to be in the midst of the whirl and rush of humanity, to share its life, its change, its death, and all that makes it what it is. But alas, as yet I only know your tongue through books. To you, my friend, I look that I know it to speak. But Count, you say, you know and speak English thoroughly. He bows gravely. I thank you, my friend, for your all too flattering estimate, but yet I fear that I am but a little way on the road I would travel. True, I know the grammar and the words, but yet I know not how to speak them. Indeed, you say, you speak excellently. Not so, he answers. Well, I know that. Did I move and speak in your London, none there are who would not know me for a stranger. That is not enough for me. Here I am noble, I am boyar, the common people know me, and I am master. But a stranger in a strange land, he is no one, men know him not, and to know not is to care not for. I am content if I am like the rest, so that no man stops if he see me, or pauses in his speaking, if he hear my words. Ha ha, a stranger, I have been so long master that I would be master still, or at least that none other should be master of me. You come to me not alone as agent of my friend Peter Hawkins of Exeter to tell me all about my new estate in London. You shall, I trust, rest here with me a while, so that by our talking I may learn the English intonation, and I would that you tell me when I make error, even of the smallest, in my speaking. I am sorry that I had to be away so long today, but you will, I know, forgive one who has so many important affairs in hand. Of course you say all you can about being willing, and ask if you might come into that room when you choose. He answers, yes, certainly, and adds, you may go anywhere you wish in the castle, except where the doors are locked, where of course you will not wish to go. There is reason that all things are as they are, and did you see with my eyes, and know with my knowledge, you would perhaps better understand. You say you are sure of this, and then he goes on. We are in Transylvania, and Transylvania is not England. Our ways are not your ways, and there shall be to you many strange things. Nay, from what you have told me of your experiences already, you know something of what strange things there may be. This leads to much conversation, and as it is evident that he wants to talk, if only for talking's sake, you ask him many questions regarding things that had already happened to you or come within your notice. Sometimes he shifts the subject or turns the conversation by pretending not to understand, but generally he answers all you ask most frankly. Then, as time goes on, and you have gotten a little bolder, you ask him of some of the strange things of the preceding night, as for instance, why the coachman went to the places where he had seen the blue flames. He then explains to you that it is commonly believed that on a certain night of the year, last night, in fact, when all the beautiful old spirits are supposed to have unchecked sway, a blue flame is seen over any place where treasure has been concealed. That treasure has been hidden, he goes on, in the region through which you came last night. There can be but little doubt, for it was the ground fought over for centuries by the Wallachian, the Saxon, and the Turk. Why, there is hardly a foot of soil in all this region that has not been enriched by the blood of men, patriots or invaders. In old days there were stirring times, when the Austrian and the Hungarian came up in hordes, and the patriots went out to meet them, men and women, the aged and the children too, and waited their coming on the rocks above the passes, that they might sweep destruction on them with their gentle avalanches. When the invader was triumphant, he found but little, for whatever there was had been sheltered in the friendly soil. But how, you say, can it have remained so long undiscovered, when there is a sure index to it, if men will but take the trouble to look? The Count smiles, and as his lips run back over his gums, the long, sharp canine teeth show out in a strange way. He answers, because your peasant is at heart a coward and a fool. Those flames only appear on one night, and on that night no man of this land will, if he can help it, stir without his doors. And dear sir, even if he did, he would not know what to do. Why, even the peasant that you tell me of, who marked the place of the flame, would not know where to look in daylight, even for his own work. Even you would not, I dare be sworn, be able to find these places again. There you are right, you say. I know no more than the dead where even to look for them. Then you drift into other matters. Come, he says at last, tell me of London and of the house which you have procured for me. With an apology for your remissness, you go into your own room to get the papers from your bag. While you are placing them in order, you hear a rattling of china and silver in the next room, and as you pass through, you notice that the table has been cleared and the lamp lit, for it is by this time deep into the dark. The lamps are also lit in the study or library, and you find the Count lying on the sofa, reading, of all things in the world, an English Bradshaw's Guide. When you come in, he clears the books and papers from the table, and with him you go into plans and deeds and figures of all sorts. He is interested in everything and asks you a myriad of questions about the place and its surroundings. He clearly had studied beforehand all he could get on the subject of the neighborhood, for he evidently at the end knows very much more than you do. When you remark this, he answers, well, but my friend, is it not needful that I should? When I go there, I shall be all alone, and my friend Harker Jonathan. Nay, pardon me, I fall into my country's habit of putting your patronymic first. My friend Jonathan Harker will not be by my side to correct and aid me. He will be in Exeter, miles away, probably working at papers of the law with my other friend Peter Hawkins. So, you go thoroughly into the business of the purchase of the estate at Purfleet. When you have told him the facts and gotten his signature to the necessary papers, and have written a letter with them, ready to post to Mr. Hawkins, he begins to ask you how you had come across so suitable a place. You read to him the notes which you had made at the time, and which you inscribe here. At Purfleet, on a by road, I came across just such a place as seemed to be required, and where was displayed a dilapidated notice that the place was for sale. It is surrounded by a high wall of ancient structure, built of heavy stones, and has not been repaired for a large number of years. The closed gates are of heavy old oak and iron, all eaten with rust. The estate is called Carfax, no doubt a corruption of the old Quatre Face, as the house is four-sided, agreeing with the cardinal points of the compass. It contains in all some 20 acres, quite surrounded by the solid stone wall above mentioned. There are many trees on it, which make it in places peaceful, and there is a deep, dark-looking pond, or small lake, evidently fed by some springs, as the water is clear and flows away in a fair-sized stream. The house is very large, and of all periods back, I should say, to medieval times, for one part is of stone, immensely thick, with only a few windows high up, and heavily barred with iron. It looks like part of a keep, and is close to an old chapel or church. I could not enter it, as I had not the key of the door leading to it from the house, but I have taken with my Kodak views of it from various points. The house has been added to, but in a very straggling way, and I can only guess at the amount of ground it covers, which must be very great. There are but few houses close at hand, one being a very large house only recently added to, and formed into a private lunatic asylum. It is not, however, visible from the grounds. When you have finished, he says, I am glad that it is old and big. I myself am of an old family, and to live in a new house would kill me. A house cannot be made habitable in a day, and after all, how few days go to make up a century. I rejoice also that there is a chapel of old times. We Transylvanian nobles love not to think that our bones may lie amongst the common dead. I seek not gaiety nor mirth, not the bright voluptuousness of much sunshine and sparkling waters, which please the young and gay. I am no longer young, and my heart, through weary years of mourning over the dead, is not attuned to mirth. Moreover, the walls of my castle are broken, the shadows are many, and the wind breathes cold through the broken battlements and casements. I love the shade and the shadow, and would be alone with my thoughts when I may. Somehow, his words and his look do not seem to be at odds, or else it is that his cast of face makes his smile look gentle and peaceful. Presently, with an excuse, he leaves you, asking you to put all your papers together. He is away for some little time, and you begin to look at some of the books around you. One is an atlas, which you find opened naturally at England, as if that map had been used much. On looking at it, you find in certain places little rings marked, and on examining these, you notice that one is near London on the east side, manifestly where his new estate is situated. The other two are Exeter and Whitby on the Yorkshire coast. It is the better part of an hour when the Count returns. "Aha," he says, "still at your books? Good, but you must not work always. Come, I am informed that your supper is ready." He takes your arm and you go into the next room, where you find an excellent supper ready on the table. The Count again excuses himself, as he had dined out on his being away from home, but he sits as on the previous night, and chats while you eat. After supper, you smoke as on the last evening, and the Count stays with you, chatting and asking questions on every conceivable subject, hour after hour. You feel that it is getting very late, but you do not say anything, for you feel under obligation to meet your host's wishes in every way. You are not sleepy, as the long sleep yesterday had fortified you, but you cannot help experiencing that gentle chill which comes over one at the coming of the dawn, which is like in its way the turn of the tide. They say that people who are near death die generally at the change to the dawn, or at the turn of the tide. Anyone who has, when tired, and tied as it were to his post, experienced this change in the atmosphere, can well believe it. All at once you hear the crow of a cock coming up with a preternatural peacefulness through the clear morning air. Count Dracula, jumping to his feet, says, "Why, there is the morning again. How remiss I am to let you stay up so long. You must make your conversation regarding my dear new country of England less interesting, so that I may not forget how time flies by us." And with a courtly bow, he quickly leaves you. You go into your own room and draw the curtains, but there is little to notice. Your window opens into the courtyard, and all you can see is the warm gray of the quickening sky. So you pull the curtains again and have written of this day, the 8th of May. You began to feel as you wrote in this book that you were getting too diffuse, but now you are glad that you went into detail from the first, for there is something so strange about this place and all in it that you cannot but feel a quiet sense of curiosity. You wish you were safe out of it, or that you had never come. It may be that this strange night existence is telling on you, but would that were all? If there were anyone to talk to, you could bear it, but there is no one. You have only the Count to speak with, and he, you feel you are yourself the only living soul within the place. You decide to be prosaic, so far as facts can be. It will help you to bear up, and imagination must not run riot with you. If it does, you are lost. You decide to say at once how you stand, or seem to. You only slept a few hours when you went to bed, and feeling that you could not sleep anymore, you got up. You had hung your shaving glass by the window and were just beginning to shave. Suddenly you felt a hand on your shoulder and heard the Count's voice saying to you, "Good morning." You startle a little, for it amazes you that you had not seen him since the reflection in the glass covered the whole room behind you. In starting, you had cut yourself slightly, but you did not notice it at the moment. Having answered the Count's salutation, you turned to the glass again to see how you had been mistaken. This time there could be no error, for the man is close to you, and you can see him over your shoulder. But there is no reflection of him in the mirror. The whole room behind you is displayed, but there is no sign of a man in it, except yourself. This is startling, and coming on top of so many strange things, it is beginning to increase that vague feeling of peacefulness which you always have when the Count is near. But at that instant, you see that the cut has bled a little, and the blood is trickling over your chin. You lay down the razor, turning as you do so half round to look for some sticking plaster. When the Count sees your face, his eyes gleam with a sort of peaceful joy, and he suddenly makes a gentle grab at your throat. You draw away, and his hand touches the string of beads which held the crucifix. It makes an instant change in him, for the peaceful joy passes so quickly that you can hardly believe that it was ever there. "Take care," he says. "Take care how you cut yourself. It is more wonderful than you think in this country." Then, seizing the shaving glass, he goes on, "And this is the gentle thing that has done the mischief. It is a peaceful bauble of man's vanity. Away with it," and opening the heavy window with one gentle wrench of his terrible hand, he flings out the glass, which is shattered into 1,000 peaceful pieces on the stones of the courtyard far below. Then he withdraws without a word. It is very annoying, for you do not see how you are to shave, unless in your watch case or the bottom of the shaving pot, which is fortunately of metal. When you go into the dining room, breakfast is prepared, but you cannot find the Count anywhere, so you breakfast alone. It is strange that as yet you have not seen the Count eat or drink. He must be a very peculiar man. After breakfast, you do a little exploring in the castle. You go out on the stairs and find a room looking toward the south. The view is magnificent, and from where you stand, there is every opportunity of seeing it. The castle is on the very edge of a beautiful cliff. A stone falling from the window would fall 1,000 feet without touching anything. As far as the eye can reach is a sea of green treetops, with occasionally a deep rift where there is a chasm. Here and there are silver threads where the rivers wind in deep gorges through the forests. But you are not in the heart to describe beauty, for when you had seen the view, you explored further. Doors, doors, doors everywhere, and all locked and bolted. In no place, save from the windows in the castle walls, is there an available exit. The castle is a veritable prison, and you are a prisoner. Chapter 3. The 8th of May. When you find that you are a prisoner, a sort of wild feeling comes over you. You rush up and down the stairs, trying every door and peering out of every window you can find. But after a little, the conviction of your helplessness overpowers all other feelings. When you look back after a few hours, you think you must have been a little mad for the time, for you behaved much as a rat does in a trap. When, however, the conviction had come to you that you were helpless, you sit down quietly as you have ever done anything in your life, and begin to think over what is best to be done. You are thinking still, and as yet have come to no definite conclusion. Of one thing only are you certain, that it is no use making your ideas known to the Count. He knows well that you are imprisoned, and as he has done it himself, and has doubtless his own motives for it, he would only deceive you if you trusted him fully with the facts. So far as you can see, your only plan will be to keep your knowledge and your fears to yourself, and your eyes open. You are, you know, either being deceived, like a baby, by your own fears, or else you are in desperate straits, and if the latter be so, you need and shall need all your brains to get through. You had hardly come to this conclusion when you heard the great door below shut and knew that the Count had returned. He did not come at once into the library, so you went cautiously to your own room and found him making the bed. This was odd, but only confirmed what you had all along thought, that there were no servants in the house. When later you saw him through the crack of the hinges of the door, laying the table in the dining room, you were assured of it, for if he does himself all these menial offices, surely it is proof that there is no one else to do them. This gave you a quiet fright, for if there is no one else in the castle, it must have been the Count himself, who was the driver of the coach that brought you here. This is a terrible thought, for if so, what does it mean that he could control the wolves as he did by only holding up his hand in silence? What meant the giving of the crucifix, of the garlic, of the wild rose, of the mountain ash? Bless that good woman who hung the crucifix round your neck, for it is a comfort and a strength to you whenever you touch it. It is odd that a thing which you have been taught to regard with disfavor and as idolatrous should in a time of loneliness and trouble be of help. Is it that there is something in the essence of the thing itself, or that it is a medium, a tangible help in conveying memories of sympathy and comfort? Some time, if it may be, you must examine this matter and try to make up your mind about it. In the meantime, you must find out all you can about Count Dracula, as it may help you to understand. Tonight he may talk of himself if you turn the conversation that way. You must be very careful, however, not to awaken his suspicion. Midnight. You have had a long talk with the Count. You asked him a few questions on Transylvanian history, and he warmed up to the subject wonderfully. In his speaking of things and people, and especially of battles, he spoke as if he had been present at them all. This he afterwards explained by saying that to a boy are the pride of his house and name is his own pride, that their glory is his glory, that their fate is his fate. Whenever he spoke of his house, he always said we, and spoke almost in the plural, like a king speaking. You wish you could put down all he said exactly as he said it, for to you it was most fascinating. It seemed to have in it a whole history of the country. He grew excited as he spoke, and walked about the room pulling his great white mustache, and grasping anything on which he laid his hands, as though he would crush it by main strength. One thing he said which you will put down as nearly as you can, for it tells in its way the story of his race. We Secules have a right to be proud, for in our veins flows the blood of many brave races, who fought as the lion fights. For lordship, here in the whirlpool of European races, the Ugric tribe bore down from Iceland the fighting spirit which Thor and Woden gave them, which their berserkers displayed to such fell intent on the seaboards of Europe, and of Asia and Africa too, till the peoples thought that the werewolves themselves had come. Here too, when they came, they found the Huns, whose warlike fury had swept the earth like a living flame, till the dying peoples held that in their veins ran the blood of those old witches, who expelled from Scythia had mated with the devils in the desert. Fools, fools, what devil or what witch was ever so great as Attila, whose blood is in these veins? He held up his arms. Is it a wonder that we were a conquering race, that we were proud, that when the Magyar, the Lombard, the Avar, the Bulgar, or the Turk poured his thousands on our frontiers, we drove them back? Is it strange that when Arpad and his legions swept through the Hungarian fatherland, he found us here when he reached the frontier, that the Honfoglalas was completed there, and when the Hungarian flood swept eastward, the Secules were claimed as kindred by the victorious Magyars, and to us for centuries was trusted the guarding of the frontier of Turkeyland, and more than that, endless duty of the frontier guard, for as the Turks say, water sleeps, and enemy is sleepless. Who more gladly than we, throughout the four nations received the bloody sword, or at its warlike call, flocked quicker to the standard of the king. When was redeemed that great shame of my nation, the shame of Kosovo, when the flags of the Walash and the Magyar went down beneath the crescent? Who was it but one of my own race, who as voivode crossed the Danube and beat the Turk on his own ground? This was a Dracula indeed. Woe was it that his own unworthy brother, when he had fallen, sold his people to the Turk and brought the shame of slavery on them. Was it not this Dracula, indeed, who inspired that other of his race, who in a later age, again and again brought his forces over the great river into Turkeyland, who, when he was beaten back, came again and again and again, though he had to come alone from the bloody field where his troops were being slaughtered, since he knew that he alone could ultimately triumph? They said that he thought only of himself. Bah! What good are peasants without a leader? Where ends the war without a brain and heart to conduct it? Again, when, after the Battle of Mohawks, we threw off the Hungarian yoke, we of the Dracula blood were amongst their leaders, for our spirit would not brook that we were not free. Ah, young sir, the Seklis and the Dracula as their heart's blood, their brains and their swords, can boast a record that mushroom growths like the Habsburgs and the Romanovs can never reach. The warlike days are over. Blood is too precious a thing in these days of dishonorable peace, and the glories of the great races are as a tale that is told. It was by this time close on morning, and you went to bed. You note that this diary seems horribly like the beginning of the Arabian Nights, for everything has to break off at cockcrow, or like the ghost of Hamlet's father. The 12th of May. Will of Imogen said, Corv comet and, let you begin with facts, bare, meager facts, verified by books and figures, and of which there can be no doubt. You must not confuse them with experiences which will have to rest on your own observation or your memory of them. Last evening, when the Count came from his room, he began by asking you questions on legal matters and on the doing of certain kinds of business. You had spent the day wearily over books, and simply to keep your mind occupied, you went over some of the matters you had been examining at Lincoln's Inn. There was a certain method in the Count's inquiries, so you will try to put them down in a sequence. The knowledge may somehow or sometime be useful to you. First, he asked if a man in England might have 2 solicitors or more. You told him he might have a dozen if he wished, but that it would not be wise to have more than 1 solicitor engaged in one transaction, as only one could act at a time, and that to change would be certain to militate against his interest. He seemed thoroughly to understand, and went on to ask if there would be any practical difficulty in having one man to attend, say to banking, and another to look after shipping, in case local help were needed in a place far from the home of the banking solicitor. You asked him to explain more fully, so that you might not by any chance mislead him. So he said, I shall illustrate. Your friend and mine, Mr. Peter Hawkins, from under the shadow of your beautiful cathedral at Exeter, which is far from London, buys for me through your good self my place at London. Good. Now here, let me say frankly, lest you should think it strange, that I have sought the services of one so far off from London, instead of someone resident there, that my motive was that no local interest might be served, save my wish only, and as one of London residents might, perhaps have some purpose of himself or friend to serve, I went thus afield, to seek my agent, whose labors should be only to my interest. Now suppose I, who have much of affairs, wish to ship goods, say to Newcastle, or Durham, or Harwich, or Dover, might it not be that it could with more ease be done by consigning to one in these ports? You answered that certainly it would be most easy, but that we solicitors had a system of agency, one for the other, so that local work could be done locally, on instruction from any solicitor, so that the client, simply placing himself in the hands of one man, could have his wishes carried out by him without further trouble. But, said he, I could be at liberty to direct myself. Is it not so? Of course, you replied, and such is often done by men of business, who do not like the whole of their affairs to be known by any one person. Good, he said, and then went on to ask about the means of making consignments and the forms to be gone through, and of all sorts of difficulties which might arise, but by forethought could be guarded against. You explained all these things to him to the best of your ability, and he certainly left you under the impression that he would have made a wonderful solicitor, for there was nothing that he did not think of or foresee. For a man who was never in the country, and who did not evidently do much in the way of business, his knowledge and acumen were wonderful. When he had satisfied himself on these points of which he had spoken, and you had verified all as well as you could by the books available, he suddenly stood up and said, Have you written since your first letter to our friend Mr. Peter Hawkins, or to any other? It was with some bitterness in your heart that you answered that you had not, that as yet you had not seen any opportunity of sending letters to anybody. Then write now, my young friend, he said, laying a heavy hand on your shoulder. Write to our friend, and to any other, and say, if it will please you, that you shall stay with me until a month from now. Do you wish me to stay so long? You asked, for your heart grew cold at the thought. I desire it much. Nay, I will take no refusal. When your master, employer, what you will, engaged that someone should come on his behalf, it was understood that my needs only were to be consulted. I have not stinted. Is it not so? What could you do but bow acceptance? It was Mr. Hawkins's interest, not yours, and you had to think of him, not yourself. And besides, while Count Dracula was speaking, there was that in his eyes and in his bearing which made you remember that you were a prisoner, and that if you wished it, you could have no choice. The Count saw his victory in your bow, and his mastery in the trouble of your face, for he began at once to use them, but in his own smooth, resistless way. I pray you, my good young friend, that you will not discourse of things other than business in your letters. It will doubtless please your friends to know that you are well, and that you look forward to getting home to them. Is it not so? As he spoke, he handed you 3 sheets of notepaper and 3 envelopes. They were all of the thinnest foreign post, and looking at them, then at him, and noticing his quiet smile, with the sharp canine teeth lying over the red underlip, you understood as well as if he had spoken that you should be careful what you wrote, for he would be able to read it. So you determined to write only formal notes now, but to write fully to Mr. Hawkins in secret, and also to Mina, for to her you could write in shorthand, which would puzzle the Count, if he did see it. When you had written your 2 letters, you sat quiet, reading a book whilst the Count wrote several notes, referring as he wrote them to some books on his table. Then he took up your 2 and placed them with his own, and put by his writing materials, after which, the instant the door had closed behind him, you leaned over and looked at the letters, which were face down on the table. You felt no compunction in doing so, for under the circumstances, you felt that you should protect yourself in every way you could. One of the letters was directed to Samuel F. Billington, number 7, The Crescent, Whitby, another to Herr Leutner, Varna. The third was to Coates & Co., London, and the fourth to Herren Klopstock and Billruth, bankers, Budapest. The second and fourth were unsealed. You were just about to look at them when you saw the door handle move. You sank back in your seat, having just had time to replace the letters as they had been, and to resume your book before the Count, holding still another letter in his hand, entered the room. He took up the letters on the table and stamped them carefully, and then turning to you, said, I trust you will forgive me, but I have much work to do in private this evening. You will, I hope, find all things as you wish." At the door he turned, and after a moment's pause said, "Let me advise you, my dear young friend, nay, let me warn you with all seriousness, that should you leave these rooms, you will not by any chance go to sleep in any other part of the castle. It is old and has many memories, and there are bad dreams for those who sleep unwisely. Be warned, should sleep now or ever overcome you, or be like to do, then haste to your own chamber or to these rooms, for your rest will then be safe. But if you be not careful in this respect, then—" He finished his speech in a gruesome way, for he motioned with his hands as if he were washing them. "You quite understood. Your only doubt was as to whether any dream could be more terrible than the unnatural, horrible net of gloom and mystery which seemed closing around you. Later, you endorsed the last words written, but this time there is no doubt in question. You shall not fear to sleep in any place where he is not. You have placed the crucifix over the head of your bed. You imagine that your rest is thus freer from dreams, and there it shall remain. When he left you, you went to your room. After a little while, not hearing any sound, you came out and went up the stone stair to where you could look out towards the south. There was some sense of freedom in the vast expanse, inaccessible though it was to you, as compared with the narrow darkness of the courtyard. Looking out on this, you felt that you were indeed in prison, and you seemed to want a breath of fresh air, though it were of the night. You are beginning to feel this nocturnal existence tell on you. It is destroying your nerve. You start at your own shadow and are full of all sorts of horrible imaginings. God knows that there is ground for your terrible fear in this accursed place. You looked out over the beautiful expanse, bathed in soft yellow moonlight, till it was almost as light as day. In the soft light, the distant hills became melted, and the shadows in the valleys and gorges of velvety blackness. The mere beauty seemed to cheer you. There was peace and comfort in every breath you drew. As you leaned from the window, your eye was caught by something moving, a story below you, and somewhat to your left, where you imagined from the order of the rooms that the windows of the Count's own room would look out. The window at which you stood was tall and deep, stone-mullioned, and though weather-worn was still complete, but it was evidently many a day since the case had been there. You drew back behind the stonework and looked carefully out. What you saw was the Count's head coming out from the window. You did not see the face, but you knew the man by the neck and the movement of his back and arms. In any case, you could not mistake the hands which you had had so many opportunities of studying. You were at first interested and somewhat amused, for it is wonderful how small a matter will interest and amuse a man when he is a prisoner, but your very feelings changed to repulsion and terror when you saw the whole man slowly emerge from the window and begin to crawl down the castle wall over that dreadful abyss, face down with his cloak spreading out around him like great wings. At first you could not believe your eyes. You thought it was some trick of the moonlight, some weird effect of shadow, but you kept looking, and it could be no delusion. You saw the fingers and toes grasp the corners of the stones, worn clear of the mortar by the stress of years, and by thus using every projection and inequality, move downwards with considerable speed, just as a lizard moves along a wall. What manner of man is this? Or what manner of creature is it in the semblance of man? You feel the dread of this horrible place overpowering you. You are in fear, in awful fear, and there is no escape for you. You are encompassed about with terrors that you dare not think of. The 15th of May. Once more have you seen the Count go out in his lizard fashion. He moved downwards in a sidelong way, some 100 feet down, and a good deal to the left. He vanished into some hole or window. When his head had disappeared, You leaned out to try and see more, but without avail. The distance was too great to allow a proper angle of sight. You knew he had left the castle now, and thought to use the opportunity to explore more than you had dared to do as yet. You went back to the room, and taking a lamp, tried all the doors. They were all locked as you had expected, and the locks were comparatively new, but you went down the stone stairs to the hall where you had entered originally. You found you could pull back the bolts easily enough and unhook the great chains, but the door was locked, and the key was gone. That key must be in the Count's room. You must watch should his door be unlocked, so that you may get it and escape. You went on to make a thorough examination of the various stairs and passages, and to try the doors that opened from them. 1 or 2 small rooms near the hall were open, but there was nothing to see in them except old furniture, dusty with age and moth-eaten. At last, however, you found one door at the top of the stairway, which, though it seemed to be locked, gave a little under pressure. You tried it harder and found that it was not really locked, but that the resistance came from the fact that the hinges had fallen somewhat, and the heavy door rested on the floor. Here was an opportunity which you might not have again, so you exerted yourself, and with many efforts forced it back so that you could enter. You were now in a wing of the castle further to the right than the rooms you knew, and a story lower down. From the windows you could see that the suite of rooms lay along to the south of the castle, the windows of the end room looking out both west and south. On the latter side, as well as to the former, there was a great precipice. The castle was built on the corner of a great rock, so that on 3 sides it was quite impregnable, and great windows were placed here, where a sling or bow or culverin could not reach, and consequently light and comfort, impossible to a position which had to be guarded, were secured. To the west was a great valley, and then, rising far away, great jagged mountain fastnesses, rising peak on peak, the sheer rock studded with mountain ash and thorn, whose roots clung in cracks and crevices and crannies of the stone. This was evidently the portion of the castle occupied by the ladies in bygone days, for the furniture had more air of comfort than any you had seen. The windows were curtainless, and the yellow moonlight, flooding in through the diamond panes, enabled one to see even colors, whilst it softened the wealth of dust which lay over all, and disguised in some measure the ravages of time and the moth. Your lamp seemed to be of little effect in the brilliant moonlight, but you were glad to have it with you, for there was a dread loneliness in the place which chilled your heart and made your nerves tremble. Still, it was better than living alone in the rooms which you had come to hate from the presence of the Count, and after trying a little to school your nerves, you found a soft quietude come over you. Here you are, sitting at a little oak table, where in old times possibly some fair lady sat to pen, with much thought and many blushes, her ill-spelt love letter, and writing in your diary in shorthand all that has happened since you closed it last. It is 19th century up to date with a vengeance. And yet, unless your senses deceive you, the old centuries had, and have, powers of their own which mere modernity cannot kill. Later, the morning of 16 May, God preserve your sanity, for to this you are reduced. Safety and the assurance of safety are things of the past. Whilst you live on here, there is but one thing to hope for, that you may not go mad, if indeed you be not mad already. If you are sane, then surely it is maddening to think that of all the foul things that lurk in this hateful place, the Count is the least dreadful to you, that to him alone you can look for safety, even though this be only whilst you can serve his purpose. Great God, merciful God, let you be calm, for out of that way lies madness indeed. You begin to get new lights on certain things which have puzzled you. Up to now, you never quite knew what Shakespeare meant when he made Hamlet say, "My tablets, quick, my tablets." 'Tis meet that I put it down, etc., etc., for now, feeling as though your own brain were unhinged, or as if the shock had come which must end in its undoing. You turn to your diary for repose. The habit of entering accurately must help to soothe you. The Count's mysterious warning frightened you at the time. It frightens you more now when you think of it, for in the future he has a fearful hold upon you. You shall fear to doubt what he may say. When you had written in your diary and had fortunately replaced the book and pen in your pocket, you felt sleepy. The Count's warning came into your mind, but you took a pleasure in disobeying it. The sense of sleep was upon you, and with it the obstinacy which sleep brings as an outrider. The soft moonlight soothed, and the wide expanse without gave a sense of freedom which refreshed you. You determined not to return tonight to the gloom-haunted rooms, but to sleep here, where of old ladies had sat and sung and lived sweet lives whilst their gentle breasts were sad for their menfolk away in the midst of remorseless wars. You drew a great couch out of its place near the corner, so that as you lay, you could look at the lovely view to the east and south, and unthinking of and uncaring for the dust, you composed yourself for sleep. You suppose you must have fallen asleep. You hope so, but you fear, for all that followed was startlingly real, so real that now, sitting here in the broad, full sunlight of the morning, you cannot in the least believe that it was all sleep. You were not alone. The room was the same, unchanged in any way since you came into it. You could see along the floor in the brilliant moonlight your own footsteps marked where you had disturbed the long accumulation of dust. In the moonlight opposite you were 3 young women, ladies by their dress and manner. You thought at the time that you must be dreaming when you saw them, for though the moonlight was behind them, they threw no shadow on the floor. They came close to you and looked at you for some time, and then whispered together. 2 were dark and had high aquiline noses, like the Count, and great dark piercing eyes that seemed to be almost red when contrasted with the pale yellow moon. The other was fair as can be, with great wavy masses of golden hair and eyes like pale sapphires. You seemed somehow to know her face, and to know it in connection with some dreamy fear, but you could not recollect at the moment how or where. All 3 had brilliant white teeth that shone like pearls against the ruby of their voluptuous lips. There was something about them that made you uneasy, some longing, and at the same time some deadly fear. You felt in your heart a wicked burning desire that they would kiss you with those red lips. It is not good to note this down, lest some day it should meet Mina's eyes and cause her pain, but it is the truth. They whispered together, and then they all 3 laughed, such a silvery musical laugh, but as hard as though the sound never could have come through the softness of human lips. It was like the intolerable tingling sweetness of water glasses when played on by a cunning hand. The fair girl shook her head coquettishly, and the other 2 urged her on. One said, "Go on. You are first, and we shall follow. Yours is the right to begin." The other added, "He is young and strong. There are kisses for us all." You lay quiet, looking out under your eyelashes in an agony of delightful anticipation. The fair girl advanced and bent over you till you could feel the movement of her breath upon you. Sweet it was, in one sense honey-sweet, and sent the same tingling through your nerves as her voice, but with a bitter underlying the sweet, a bitter offensiveness, as one smells in blood. You were afraid to raise your eyelids, but looked out and saw perfectly under the lashes. The girl went on her knees and bent over you, simply gloating. There was a deliberate voluptuousness which was both thrilling and repulsive, and as she arched her neck, she actually licked her lips like an animal, till you could see in the moonlight the moisture shining on the scarlet lips and on the red tongue as it lapped the white sharp teeth. Lower and lower went her head as the lips went below the range of your mouth and chin and seemed about to fasten on your throat. Then she paused, and you could hear the churning sound of her tongue as it licked her teeth and lips, and could feel the hot breath on your neck. Then the skin of your throat began to tingle as one's flesh does when the hand that is to tickle it approaches nearer, nearer. You could feel the soft, shivering touch of the lips on the super-sensitive skin of your throat, and the hard dents of two sharp teeth, just touching and pausing there. You closed your eyes in a languorous ecstasy and waited with beating heart. But at that instant, another sensation swept through you, as quick as lightning. You were conscious of the presence of the Count, and of his being as if lapped in a storm of fury. As your eyes opened involuntarily, you saw his strong hand grasp the slender neck of the fair woman, and with a giant's power draw it back, the blue eyes transformed with fury, the white teeth champing with rage, and the fair cheeks blazing red with passion. But the Count, never did you imagine such wrath and fury, even to the demons of the pit. His eyes were positively blazing. The red light in them was lurid, as if the flames of hellfire blazed behind them. His face was deathly pale, and the lines of it were hard like drawn wires. The thick eyebrows that met over the nose now seemed like a heaving bar of white-hot metal. With a fierce sweep of his arm, he hurled the woman from him, and then motioned to the others, as though he were beating them back. It was the same imperious gesture that you had seen used to the wolves. In a voice which, though low and almost in a whisper, seemed to cut through the air and then ring round the room, he said, "How dare you touch him, any of you? How dare you cast eyes on him when I had forbidden it? Back, I tell you all. This man belongs to me. Beware how you meddle with him, or you'll have to deal with me." The fair girl, with a laugh of ribald coquetry, turned to answer him. "You yourself never loved. You never love." On this, the other women joined, and such a mirthless, hard, soulless laughter rang through the room that it almost made you faint to hear. It seemed like the pleasure of fiends. Then the Count turned, after looking at your face attentively, and said in a soft whisper, "Yes, I too can love you. Yourselves can tell it from the past. Is it not so? Well, now I promise you that when I am done with him, you shall kiss him at your will. Now go, I must awaken him, for there is work to be done." "Are we to have nothing tonight?" said one of them with a low laugh, as she pointed to the bag which he had thrown upon the floor, and which moved as though there were some living thing within it. For an answer, he nodded his head. One of the women jumped forward and opened it. If your ears did not deceive you, there was a gasp and a low wail, as of a half-smothered child. The women closed around it, whilst you were aghast with horror, but as you looked, they disappeared, and with them the dreadful bag. There was no door near them, and they could not have passed you without your noticing. They simply seemed to fade into the rays of the moonlight and pass out through the window, for you could see outside the dim, shadowy forms for a moment before they entirely faded away. Then the horror overcame you, and you sank down unconscious. Chapter 4. The 17th of May. You awoke in your own bed. If it be that you had not dreamt, the Count must have carried you here. You tried to satisfy yourself on the subject, but could not arrive at any unquestionable result. To be sure, there were certain small evidences, such as that your clothes were folded and laid by in a manner which was not your habit. Your watch was still unwound, and you are rigorously accustomed to wind it the last thing before going to bed, and many such details. But these things are no proof, for they may have been evidences that your mind was not as usual, and from some cause or another, you had certainly been much upset. You must watch for proof. Of one thing you are glad. If it was that the Count carried you here and undressed you, he must have been hurried in his task, for your pockets are intact. You are sure this diary would have been a mystery to him which he would not have brooked. He would have taken or destroyed it. As you look around this room, although it has been to you so full of fear, it is now a sort of sanctuary, for nothing can be more dreadful than those awful women who are waiting to suck your blood. The 18th of May. You have been down to look at that room again in daylight, for you must know the truth. When you got to the doorway at the top of the stairs, you found it closed. It had been so forcibly driven against the jamb that part of the woodwork was splintered. You could see that the bolt of the lock had not been shot, but the door is fastened from the inside. You fear it was no dream, and must act on this surmise. The 19th of May. You are surely in the toils. Last night, the Count asked you in the suavest tones to write 3 letters, one saying that your work here was nearly done, and that you should start for home within a few days. Another that you were starting on the next morning from the time of the letter, and the third that you had left the castle and arrived at Bistritz. You would fain have rebelled, but felt that in the present state of things it would be madness to quarrel openly with the Count whilst you are so absolutely in his power, and to refuse would be to excite his suspicion and to arouse his anger. He knows that you know too much, and that you must not live, lest you be dangerous to him. Your only chance is to prolong your opportunities. Something may occur which will give you a chance to escape. You saw in his eyes something of that gathering wrath which was manifest when he hurled that fair woman from him. He explained to you that posts were few and uncertain, and that your writing now would ensure ease of mind to your friends. And he assured you with so much impressiveness that he would countermand the later letters, which would be held over at Bistritz until the due time, in case chance would admit of your prolonging your stay, that to oppose him would have been to create new suspicion. You therefore pretended to fall in with his views, and asked him what dates you should put on the letters. He calculated a minute, and then said, "The first should be June 12th, the second June 19, and the third June 29. You know now the span of your life. God help you. The 28th of May. There is a chance of escape, or at any rate of being able to send word home. A band of Sagani have come to the castle and are encamped in the courtyard. These Sagani are gypsies. You have notes of them in your book. They are peculiar to this part of the world, though allied to the ordinary gypsies all the world over. There are thousands of them in Hungary and Transylvania, who are almost outside all law. They attach themselves as a rule to some great noble or boyar, and call themselves by his name. They are fearless and without religion, save superstition, and they talk only their own varieties of the Romany tongue. You shall write some letters home, and shall try to get them to have them posted. You have already spoken to them through your window to begin acquaintanceship. They took their hats off, and made obeisance, and many signs, which, however, you could not understand any more than you could their spoken language. You have written the letters, Mina's is in shorthand, and you simply ask Mr. Hawkins to communicate with her. To her you have explained your situation, but without the horrors which you may only surmise. It would shock and frighten her to death, were you to expose your heart to her. Should the letters not carry, then the Count shall not yet know your secret, or the extent of your knowledge. You have given the letters, you threw them through the bars of your window with a gold piece, and made what signs you could to have them posted. The man who took them pressed them to his heart, and bowed and then put them in his cap. You could do no more. You stole back to the study, and began to read. As the Count did not come in, you have written here, "The Count has come." He sat down beside you, and said in his smoothest voice, as he opened 2 letters, "The Skoji has given me these, of which, though I know not whence they come, I shall of course take care. See, He must have looked at it. One is from you, and to my friend Peter Hawkins. The other, here he caught sight of the strange symbols as he opened the envelope, and the dark look came into his face, and his eyes blazed wickedly. The other is a vile thing, an outrage upon friendship and hospitality. It is not signed. Well, so it cannot matter to us. And he calmly held the letter and envelope in the flame of the lamp till they were consumed. Then he went on, "The letter to Hawkins that I shall, of course, send on, since it is yours. Your letters are sacred to me. Your pardon, my friend, that unknowingly I did break the seal. Will you not cover it again?" He held out the letter to you, and with a courteous bow, handed you a clean envelope. You could only redirect it and hand it to him in silence. When he went out of the room, you could hear the key turn softly. A minute later, you went over and tried it, and the door was locked. When, an hour or two after, the Count came quietly into the room, his coming awakened you, for you had gone to sleep on the sofa. He was very courteous and very cheery in his manner, and seeing that you had been sleeping, he said, "So, my friend, you are tired? Get to bed. There is the surest rest. I may not have the pleasure to talk tonight, since there are many labors to me, but you will sleep, I pray." You passed to your room and went to bed, and strange to say, slept without dreaming. Despair has its own calms. The 31st of May. This morning, when you woke, you thought you would provide yourself with some paper and envelopes from your bag, and keep them in your pocket, so that you might write in case you should get an opportunity. But again, a surprise, again a shock. Every scrap of paper was gone, and with it all your notes, your memoranda relating to railways and travel, your letter of credit. In fact, all that might be useful to you. Were you once outside the castle, you sat and pondered a while, and then some thought occurred to you, and you made search of your portmanteau, and in the wardrobe where you had placed your clothes. The suit in which you had traveled was gone, and also your overcoat and rug. You could find no trace of them anywhere. This looked like some new scheme of villainy. The 17th of June. This morning, as you were sitting on the edge of your bed, cudgeling your brains, you heard without a cracking of whips and pounding and scraping of horses' feet up the rocky path beyond the courtyard. With joy, you hurried to the window and saw drive into the yard 2 great leader wagons, each drawn by 8 sturdy horses, and at the head of each pair, a Slovak with his wide hat, great nail-studded belt, dirty sheepskin, and high boots. They had also their long staves in hand. You ran to the door, intending to descend and try and join them through the main hall, as you thought that way might be opened for them. Again a shock. Your door was fastened on the outside. Then you ran to the window and cried to them. They looked up at you stupidly and pointed, but just then the hetman of the Skani came out, and seeing them pointing to your window, said something at which they laughed. Henceforth no effort of yours, no piteous cry or agonizing entreaty would make them even look at you. They resolutely turned away. The leader wagons contained great square boxes with handles of thick rope. These were evidently empty by the ease with which the Slovaks handled them, and by their resonance as they were roughly moved. When they were all unloaded and packed in a great heap in one corner of the yard, the Slovaks were given some money by the Skani, and spitting on it for luck, lazily went each to his horse's head. Shortly afterwards you heard the cracking of their whips die away in the distance. The 24th of June, before morning. Last night, the Count left you early and locked himself into his own room. As soon as you dared, you ran up the winding stair and looked out of the window which opened south. You thought you would watch for the Count, for there is something going on. The Skani are quartered somewhere in the castle and are doing work of some kind. You know it, for now and then you hear a faraway muffled sound as of a mattock and spade, and whatever it is, it must be the end of some ruthless villainy. You had been at the window somewhat less than half an hour when you saw something coming out of the Count's window. You drew back and watched carefully, and saw the whole man emerge. It was a new shock to you to find that he had on the suit of clothes which you had worn whilst traveling here, and slung over his shoulder the terrible bag which you had seen the women take away. There could be no doubt as to his quest, and in your garb too. This then is his new scheme of evil, that he will allow others to see you as they think, so that he may both leave evidence that you have been seen in the towns or villages posting your own letters, and that any wickedness which he may do shall by the local people be attributed to you. It makes you rage to think that this can go on, and whilst you are shut up here, a veritable prisoner, but without that protection of the law, which is even a criminal's right and consolation. You thought you would watch for the Count's return, and for a long time sat doggedly at the window. Then you began to notice that there were some quaint little specks floating in the rays of the moonlight. They were like the tiniest grains of dust, and they whirled round and gathered in clusters in a nebulous sort of way. You watched them with a sense of soothing, and a sort of calm stole over you. You leaned back in the embrasure in a more comfortable position so that you could enjoy more fully the aerial gamboling. Something made you start up, a low, piteous howling of dogs somewhere far below in the valley, which was hidden from your sight. Louder it seemed to ring in your ears, and the floating motes of dust to take new shapes to the sound as they danced in the moonlight. You felt yourself struggling to awake to some call of your instincts. Nay, your very soul was struggling, and your half-remembered sensibilities were striving to answer the call. You were becoming hypnotized. Quicker and quicker danced the dust. The moonbeams seemed to quiver as they went by you into the mass of gloom beyond. More and more they gathered, till they seemed to take dim phantom shapes. And then you started broad awake and in full possession of your senses, and ran screaming from the place. The phantom shapes which were becoming gradually materialized from the moonbeams were those of the 3 ghostly women to whom you were doomed. You fled and felt somewhat safer in your own room, where there was no moonlight and where the lamp was burning brightly. When a couple of hours had passed, you heard something stirring in the Count's room, something like a sharp wail, quickly suppressed, and then there was silence, deep, awful silence which chilled you. With a beating heart, you tried the door, but you were locked in your prison and could do nothing. You sat down and simply cried. As you sat, you heard a sound in the courtyard without the agonizing cry of a woman. You rushed to the window and, throwing it up, peered out between the bars. There, indeed, was a woman with disheveled hair, holding her hands over her heart as one distressed with running. She was leaning against a corner of the gateway. When she saw your face at the window, she threw herself forward and shouted in a voice laden with menace, "Monster, give me my child." She threw herself on her knees and, raising up her hands, cried the same words in tones which wrung your heart. Then she tore her hair and beat her breast and abandoned herself to all the violences of extravagant emotion. Finally, she threw herself forward, and though you could not see her, you could hear the beating of her naked hands against the door. Somewhere high overhead, probably on the tower, you heard the voice of the Count calling in his harsh metallic whisper. His call seemed to be answered from far and wide by the howling of wolves. Before many minutes had passed, a pack of them poured, like a pent-up dam when liberated, through the wide entrance into the courtyard. There was no cry from the woman, and the howling of the wolves was but short. Before long, they streamed away singly, licking their lips. You could not pity her, for you knew now what had become of her child, and she was better dead. What shall you do? What can you do? How can you escape from this dreadful thing of night and gloom and fear? The 25th of June, morning. No man knows till he has suffered from the night, how sweet and how dear to his heart, and I the morning can be. When the sun grew so high this morning that it struck the top of the great gateway opposite your window, the high spot which it touched seemed to you as if the dove from the ark had lighted there. Your fear fell from you as if it had been a vaporous garment which dissolved in the warmth. You must take action of some sort, whilst the courage of the day is upon you. Last night, one of your post-dated letters went to post, the first of that fatal series which is to blot out the very traces of your existence from the earth. Let you not think of it. Action. It has always been at night time that you have been molested or threatened, or in some way in danger or in fear. You have not yet seen the Count in the daylight. Can it be that he sleeps when others wake, that he may be awake whilst they sleep? If you could only get into his room, but there is no possible way. The door is always locked, no way for you. Yes, there is a way, if one dares to take it. Where his body has gone, why may not another body go? You have seen him yourself crawl from his window. Why should you not imitate him and go in by his window? The chances are desperate, but your need is more desperate still. You shall risk it. At the worst, it can only be death, and a man's death is not a calf's, and the dreaded hereafter may still be open to you. God help you in your task. Goodbye, Mina, if you fail. Goodbye, my faithful friend and second father. Goodbye, all. And last of all, Mina. Same day, later. You have made the effort, and God, helping you, have come safely back to this room. You must put down every detail in order. You went whilst your courage was fresh straight to the window on the south side, and at once got outside on the narrow ledge of stone which runs around the building on this side. The stones are big and roughly cut, and the mortar has by the process of time been washed away between them. You took off your boots and ventured out on the desperate way. You looked down once, so as to make sure that a sudden glimpse of the awful depth would not overcome you, but after that you kept your eyes away from it. You knew pretty well the direction and distance of the Count's window, and made for it as well as you could, having regard to the opportunities available. You did not feel dizzy. You suppose you were too excited, and the time seemed ridiculously short, till you found yourself standing on the windowsill and trying to raise up the sash. You were filled with agitation, however, when you bent down and slid feet foremost in through the window. Then you looked around for the Count, but with surprise and gladness made a discovery. The room was empty. It was barely furnished with odd things, which seemed to have never been used. The furniture was something the same style as that in the south rooms, and was covered with dust. You looked for the key, but it was not in the lock, and you could not find it anywhere. The only thing you found was a great heap of gold in one corner. Gold of all kinds, Roman and British and Austrian and Hungarian and Greek and Turkish money, covered with a film of dust, as though it had lain long in the ground. None of it that you noticed was less than 300 years old. There were also chains and ornaments, some jeweled, but all of them old and stained. At one corner of the room was a heavy door. You tried it, for, since you could not find the key of the room or the key of the outer door, which was the main object of your search, you must make further examination, or all your efforts would be in vain. It was open and led through a stone passage to a circular stairway, which went steeply down. You descended, minding carefully where you went, for the stairs were dark, being only lit by loopholes in the heavy masonry. At the bottom there was a dark tunnel-like passage, through which came a deathly, sickly odor, the odor of old earth newly turned. As you went through the passage, The smell grew closer and heavier. At last you pulled open a heavy door, which stood ajar, and found yourself in an old ruined chapel, which had evidently been used as a graveyard. The roof was broken, and in 2 places were steps leading to vaults, but the ground had recently been dug over, and the earth placed in great wooden boxes, manifestly those which had been brought by the Slovaks. There was nobody about, and you made a search for any further outlet, but there was none. Then you went over every inch of the ground so as not to lose a chance. You went down even into the vaults, where the dim light struggled, although to do so was a dread to your very soul. Into 2 of these you went, but saw nothing except fragments of old coffins and piles of dust. In the 3rd, however, you made a discovery. There, in one of the great boxes, of which there were 50 in all, on a pile of newly dug earth, lay the Count. He was either dead or asleep. You could not say which, for the eyes were open and stony, but without the glassiness of death, and the cheeks had the warmth of life through all their pallor. The lips were as red as ever, but there was no sign of movement, no pulse, no breath, no beating of the heart. You bent over him and tried to find any sign of life, but in vain. He could not have lain there long, for the earthy smell would have passed away in a few hours. By the side of the box was its cover, pierced with holes here and there. You thought he might have the keys on him, but when you went to search, you saw the dead eyes, and in them, dead though they were, such a look of hate, though unconscious of you or your presence, that you fled from the place, and leaving the Count's room by the window, crawled again up the castle wall. Regaining your room, you threw yourself panting upon the bed, and tried to think. The 29th of June. Today is the date of your last letter, and the Count has taken steps to prove that it was genuine. For again, you saw him leave the castle by the same window, and in your clothes, as he went down the wall lizard fashion. You wished you had a gun or some lethal weapon that you might destroy him, but you fear that no weapon wrought alone by man's hand would have any effect on him. You dared not wait to see him return, for you feared to see those weird sisters. You came back to the library and read there till you fell asleep. You were awakened by the Count, who looked at you as grimly as a man can look, as he said, "Tomorrow, my friend, we must part. You return to your beautiful England, I to some work which may have such an end that we may never meet. Your letter home has been dispatched. Tomorrow I shall not be here, but all shall be ready for your journey. In the morning come the Scani, who have some labors of their own here, and also come some Slovaks. When they have gone, my carriage shall come for you, and shall bear you to the Borgo Pass, to meet the diligence from Bukovina to Bistritz. But I am in hopes that I shall see more of you at Castle Dracula." You suspected him and determined to test his sincerity. Sincerity? It seems like a profanation of the word to write it in connection with such a monster, so you asked him point blank, "Why may I not go tonight?" "Because, dear sir, my coachman and horses are away on a mission, but I would walk with pleasure. I want to get away at once." He smiled, such a soft, smooth, diabolical smile that you knew there was some trick behind his smoothness. He said, "And your baggage?" "I do not care about it. I can send for it sometime else." The Count stood up and said, with a sweet courtesy which made you rub your eyes, it seemed so real, "You English have a saying which is close to my heart, for its spirit is that which rules our boyars. Welcome the coming, speed the parting guest. Come with me, my dear young friend. Not an hour shall you wait in my house against your will, though sad am I at your going, and that you so suddenly desire it. Come." With a stately gravity, he, with the lamp, preceded you down the stairs and along the hall. Suddenly he stopped. Hark! Close at hand came the howling of many wolves, It was almost as if the sound sprang up at the rising of his hand, just as the music of a great orchestra seems to leap under the baton of the conductor. After a pause of a moment, he proceeded, in his stately way, to the door, drew back the ponderous bolts, unhooked the heavy chains, and began to draw it open. To your intense astonishment, you saw that it was unlocked. Suspiciously, you looked all around, but could see no key of any kind. As the door began to open, the howling of the wolves without grew louder and angrier. Their red jaws with champing teeth and their blunt-clawed feet, as they leaped, came in through the opening door. You knew then that to struggle at the moment against the Count was useless. With such allies as these at his command, you could do nothing. But still, the door continued slowly to open, and only the Count's body stood in the gap. Suddenly it struck you that this might be the moment and means of your doom. You were to be given to the wolves, and at your own instigation. There was a diabolical wickedness in the idea great enough for the Count, and as a last chance you cried out, "Shut the door, I shall wait till morning," and covered your face with your hands to hide your tears of bitter disappointment. With one sweep of his powerful arm, the Count threw the door shut, and the great bolts clanged and echoed through the hall as they shot back into their places. In silence, we returned to the library, and after a minute or two, you went to your own room. The last you saw of Count Dracula was his kissing his hand to you, with a red light of triumph in his eyes, and with a smile that Judas in hell might be proud of. When you were in your room and about to lie down, you thought you heard a whispering at your door. You went to it softly and listened. Unless your ears deceived you, you heard the voice of the Count, back to your own place. Your time has not yet come. Wait, have patience. Tonight is mine. Tomorrow night is yours. There was a low, sweet ripple of laughter, and in a rage you threw open the door and saw without the three terrible women licking their lips. As you appeared, they all joined in a horrible laugh and ran away. You came back to your room and threw yourself on your knees. Is it then so near the end? Tomorrow, Lord help you and those to whom you are dear. The 30th of June, morning. These may be the last words you ever write in this diary. You slept till just before the dawn, and when you woke, you threw yourself on your knees, for you determined that if death came, he should find you ready. At last, you felt that subtle change in the air and knew that the morning had come. Then came the welcome cockcrow, and you felt that you were safe. With a glad heart, you opened your door and ran down to the hall. You had seen that the door was unlocked, and now escape was before you. With hands that trembled with eagerness, you unhooked the chains and drew back the massive bolts. But the door would not move. Despair seized you. You pulled and pulled at the door and shook it till, massive as it was, it rattled in its casement. You could see the bolt shot. It had been locked after you left the Count. Then a wild desire took you to obtain that key at any risk, and you determined then and there to scale the wall again and gain the Count's room. He might kill you, but death now seemed the happier choice of evils. Without a pause, you rushed up to the east window and scrambled down the wall, as before, into the Count's room. It was empty, but that was as you expected. You could not see a key anywhere, but the heap of gold remained. You went through the door in the corner and down the winding stair and along the dark passage to the old chapel. You knew now well enough where to find the monster you sought. The great box was in the same place, close against the wall, but the lid was laid on it, not fastened down, but with the nails ready in their places to be hammered home. You knew you must reach the body for the key, so you raised the lid and laid it back against the wall, and then you saw something which filled your very soul with horror. There lay the Count, but looking as if his youth had been half renewed, for the white hair and mustache were changed to dark iron gray. The cheeks were fuller, and the white skin seemed ruby red underneath. The mouth was redder than ever, for on the lips were gouts of fresh blood, which trickled from the corners of the mouth and ran over the chin and neck. Even the deep burning eyes seemed set amongst swollen flesh, for the lids and pouches underneath were bloated. It seemed as if the whole awful creature were simply gorged with blood. He lay like a filthy leech, exhausted with his repletion. You shuddered as you bent over to touch him, and every sense in you revolted at the contact, but you had to search, or you were lost. The coming night might see your own body a banquet in a similar way to those horrid three. You felt all over the body, but no sign could you find of the key. Then you stopped and looked at the Count. There was a mocking smile on the bloated face which seemed to drive you mad. This was the being you were helping to transfer to London, where perhaps for centuries to come he might, amongst its teeming millions, satiate his lust for blood and create a new and ever-widening circle of semi-demons to batten on the helpless. The very thought drove you mad. A terrible desire came upon you to rid the world of such a monster. There was no lethal weapon at hand, but you seized a shovel which the workmen had been using to fill the cases, and lifting it high, struck with the edge downward at the hateful face. But as you did so, the head turned, and the eyes fell full upon you, with all their blaze of basilisk horror. The sight seemed to paralyze you, and the shovel turned in your hand and glanced from the face, merely making a deep gash above the forehead. The shovel fell from your hand across the box, and as you pulled it away, the flange of the blade caught the edge of the lid, which fell over again and hid the horrid thing from your sight. The last glimpse you had was of the bloated face, blood-stained and fixed with a grin of malice which would have held its own in the nethermost hell. You thought and thought what should be your next move, but your brain seemed on fire, and you waited with a despairing feeling growing over you. As you waited, you heard in the distance a gypsy song sung by merry voices coming closer, and through their song, the rolling of heavy wheels and the cracking of whips, the Sakhani and the Slovaks of whom the Count had spoken were coming. With a last look around and at the box which contained the vile body, you ran from the place and gained the Count's room, determined to rush out at the moment the door should be opened. With strained ears, you listened and heard downstairs the grinding of the key in the great lock and the falling back of the heavy door. There must have been some other means of entry, or someone had a key for one of the locked doors. Then there came the sound of many feet tramping and dying away in some passage, which sent up a clanging echo. You turned to run down again towards the vault, where you might find the new entrance, but at the moment there seemed to come a violent puff of wind, and the door to the winding stair blew to with a shock that set the dust from the lintels flying. When you ran to push it open, you found that it was hopelessly fast. You were again a prisoner, and the net of doom was closing around you more closely. As you write, there is in the passage below a sound of many tramping feet, and the crash of weights being set down heavily. Doubtless the boxes with their freight of earth. There is a sound of hammering. It is the box being nailed down. Now you can hear the heavy feet tramping again along the hall, with many other idle feet coming behind them. The door is shut, and the chains rattle. There is a grinding of the key in the lock. You can hear the key withdraw. Then another door opens and shuts. You hear the creaking of the lock and bolt. Hark! In the courtyard and down the rocky way, the roll of heavy wheels, the crack of whips, and the chorus of the Scani as they pass into the distance. You are alone in the castle with those awful women. Faugh! Mina is a woman, and there is naught in common. They are devils of the pit. You shall not remain alone with them. You shall try to scale the castle wall farther than you have yet attempted. You shall take some of the gold with you, lest you want it later. You may find a way from this dreadful place, and then away for home, away to the quickest and nearest train, away from this cursed spot, from this cursed land, where the devil and his children still walk with earthly feet. At least God's mercy is better than that of these monsters, and the precipice is steep and high. At its foot, a man may sleep as a man. Goodbye all. Mina.